bratty teenager, this was a kid who genuinely didn't believe rules applied to him. I marched back over to the Ferguson's house, but this time Mr. Ferguson answered the door. "What's the big deal?" he said after I explained the situation. "It's just a pool. Let the kid cool off. You're being uptight." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They weren't even pretending to be sorry. I told him in no uncertain terms that Aiden needed to stay out of my yard, but he just shrugged and closed the door. At that point, I knew I had to get creative. Calling the police felt extreme, but I was out of options. I put up no trespassing signs around the fence, thinking that might at least scare him off. It didn't. Aiden kept coming back, and every time I confronted him, he'd give me some snarky comment like, "What are you going to do? Call the pool police?" I started losing sleep over it. Every splash, every little noise outside, I'd jump up and check the backyard. It was exhausting. I needed a plan, a way to send a message that would make it clear I wasn't messing around. And then it hit me, if Aiden loved my pool so much, what would he do if there wasn't a pool? The next morning, I drained the entire thing. It took hours, but I didn't care. Once it was empty, I called a local foam supplier and ordered a truckload of foam blocks. You know the kind they use in gymnastics pits? It cost me a small fortune, but at that point, it was worth it. By the end of the day, my pool was no longer a pool, it was a giant foam pit. It looked absolutely ridiculous, but I didn't care. This was about principle. It didn't take long for Aiden to strike again. That same evening, I heard the telltale sound of someone climbing the fence. I didn't even bother looking out the window. I just waited. Sure enough, a few seconds later, I heard the loudest, most satisfying scream. "What the hell?" Aiden shouted, his voice cracking in panic. I think I broke something. I went outside, casually sipping a glass of iced tea, and found him flailing around in the foam like a fish out of water. "What's the big deal?" I said, echoing his favorite line. "It's just foam." He was so angry he could barely speak. Eventually, he managed to climb out and limped home, shouting over his shoulder, "You're going to regret this." About an hour later, the Fergusons were at my door, banging so hard I thought they might break it down. Mrs. Ferguson was red-faced and screeching, "How dare you traumatize our son?" Mr. Ferguson was no better. "You could have killed him with that stupid stunt," he yelled. "You're lucky he didn't break his neck." I calmly explained that Aiden had been trespassing on my property and that the foam was completely safe. "Maybe if you taught your kid some respect, we wouldn't be in this situation," I added. That's when Mr. Ferguson's face turned a deep shade of purple. He pointed a finger at me and said, "You'll be hearing from our lawyer." The next day, I got a letter from a lawyer's office. The Fergusons were suing me for emotional distress, medical expenses, and property damage. I wasn't surprised. They seemed like the type to blame anyone but themselves. Their claim was laughable, though. Emotional distress from foam? Medical expenses? Aiden barely twisted his ankle, and I had video proof from my new security cameras showing him trespassing. I knew this was going to get ugly, but I wasn't about to back down. I hired a lawyer of my own, an old friend who specialized in property disputes. He laughed when I told him the story. "This will be fun," he said. "They don't have a leg to stand on."